And then, starting in November of 1990, they began to get what we call red Bubba sightings. A red thing that would move through the sky and then suddenly turn into flashing white lights. Uh, might have been a pyrotechnic effect, but if it were, it was a very dangerous one because you never know when some pyrotechnic's going to fall out of the sky and land on something, bushes or whatever. This is happening right over Gulf Breeze. So if this is somebody running a scam operation, then it was a dangerous one. But anyway, it was basically a red light would appear in the sky, travel through the sky for a certain distance, and suddenly burst into a white flash and disappear. And that happened in 1991, all the way through and into 1992. By the time this series of sightings died in July 1992, the local witnesses who got to the point where they were going out virtually every night to see what would happen, and very often getting rewarded for their efforts, they had 170 or 200, I forget the number now, well over 100 sightings that they had logged. Well, one of those sightings was one that I was there for. In September of 1991, instead of getting a red light coming through the sky, they started getting rings of light, rings of basically white light. So I lived in Maryland at the time, and I decided I'd better get down there and see what was going on. So I went. I arrived on a Friday, and we went to the standard viewing area at the south end of the Pensacola Bay Bridge, just at the edge of Gulf Breeze, and there was a parking area there where people were parked, and nothing happened on Friday night. On Saturday night, we went out to look again, and this time, let me say, I had with me camera, tape recorder, video camera, and a big ear for listening. A big ear is an amplified microphone, one of these things they talk about that you can hear a whisper 100 feet away or something. I figured if these objects were going through the sky were driven by a motorized craft, like a miniature airplane, you'd hear it. So as I was along with everybody else waiting to see if something would happen, when all of a sudden some lady yells, "There it is." She didn't say where it was. I just flipped my, raised my gaze, my vision up to some angle, and there, sure enough, there was a spot of light in the sky where there hadn't been anything before. It was a hazy sky, sort of glowing from lights of Gulf Breeze, and you couldn't see the stars with your naked eye, but you could see the stars through this haze if you had binoculars. So everybody had binoculars. I whipped up my binoculars and I looked, and there this single dot of light resolved into a ring of 8 lights, and it moved a short distance, either upwards or sideways or both, and then faded out. And I didn't immediately call the guys in white lab coats with butterfly nets to come and take me away, ho-ho, because there were 30 other people there. They would have to take away everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I figured out later on that because of the sky glow, well, number one, I couldn't hear any sound. I pointed the big ear at it, and I couldn't hear any sound. I figured it couldn't be more than a few thousand feet away, if that far. If this was a framework holding lights, there had to be some structure that was visible holding lights together. And I deduced from the way the atmosphere was going that if this was too low, if this was a low altitude, let's say 2,000 feet below the sky glow, I would see this thing silhouetted against the sky glow, and I could see the structure of the main body of whatever it was. That's what I figured would happen. But I couldn't see anything except the lights themselves. That left one other alternative, namely that the object was, whatever it was up above this glow of the atmosphere, far enough up so that I couldn't see. The glow covered up the body of the craft, but the light from the lights could make it through the glow, so I could see the lights and not see the body, if the body of the craft were high enough, and based on the altitude of the sky glow, 4,000 or 5,000 feet. The point being that if it was low down, it was one size. If it was high up, it was bigger. High up, it was another size, and I concluded that it could have been 10 or 15 feet in diameter, which is a pretty good size structure to float, to fly through the air with a bunch of lights. I have to say that that's an unknown as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, back, a lot of people tried it. I remember back maybe 10 years ago, some shows, were trying to discredit a lot of lights, the UFOs and stuff. So they were like releasing balloons with lights on them and stuff like that. It, try to show, oh, this is your UFO you saw. But I mean, I don't know. I've had one experience many years ago in a desert, New Mexico, and where I saw a bright light where it lit up my whole side of the car. It looked like daylight around the car. I thought I was going to be getting a ticket from, maybe it was like a helicopter or something. I got out there. There was no sound of anything. It was just dead desert quiet. And, as fast as, I saw it, it was poof, it was gone. And I talked to Peter Davenport about it. And that was like one of the first experiences he had, that he saw something similar to what I see. And he said he gets a lot of reports of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, well, one of the things that they had recorded as the characteristic of flying saucer way back in 1947 was the ability to suddenly appear as if dropping down from a high altitude, and then suddenly disappear as if having complete a high speed drive going away, or complete disintegration. In other words, the ability of one of these things to basically disappear fast, so in some way, so it's there, and then the next microsecond it's gone.
Well, I'm sure they have the technology to cloak too, so they're probably using that too. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. How do you? We only got a few minutes left.
Well,
Bruce, how do you
talk about a possible cloaking case from Gulf?
Go ahead.
It didn't involve Ed at all, but it involves magnetism. This guy who was owned oil wells, and he used a special magnetic field gradiometer device to detect the top of a wellhead. They would drill a well, drive steel pipes down into it to keep it from collapsing, and then seal it off and go away and come back later maybe if they thought they could get something out of it. So he'd have to find where these wellheads were, and they were a few feet underwater, under the ground, typically. So he would go walking along over an area where there's supposedly some wellheads with this field gradiometer, which was a very sensitive thing for measuring magnetism. A compass measures magnetism. You don't think of it that way, but when it's lining itself up to point to the north, for example, it's measuring them. It's measuring for its own cells the strength of the Earth's field, which causes the little needle to rotate until it lines up. Well, this guy had this much more sensitive field gradiometer. On a Friday night, he comes home from work, and his wife tells him that there was a flying saucer that she saw leave from behind their house and take off. So the next morning, he thinks he might see if he can find any remnant of a flying saucer, and he goes out there and he starts waving this magnetometer thing around an area of a lake. He notices that there's three circular areas of depressed underwater weeds in this little lake. It's only 4 or 5 feet deep, if that deep. but he could clearly see the depressed the circle. So he's walking around with his magnetometer, and it starts reacting as if there was some big piece of metal. I got an article on this. Well, this is one of the cases that I spoke to the CIA on back in 1992. It's in my book on FBI, CIA, UFO connection. And you can also read about it on my website, where there was. Well, I asked a guy who knew about magnetism, and he said the amount of change, the amount of signal generated by this device was comparable to being 100 feet in front of a destroyed battleship or something like that. a huge chunk of iron would explain the large effect on this gradiometer. But the point is, he was videotaped by UFO investigators doing this, making these essential measurements by walking around looking for where there was a magnetic field, and they couldn't see any source of the field. There wasn't any. We assumed it had to do with this flying saucer, but there was nothing there. They kept looking for any evidence of a craft. That might have been the Klingon cloaking effect, but there must have been something there that was the source of the magnetic field, but they couldn't see it.
That is interesting. Now, we just got a couple minutes left. What do you see is going to happen in the next year or two in disclosure, ufology, abductions? Do you think it's going to still be going rampant here 6 months from now, or do you think it's going to kind of die out for a while again?
Well, it's always been partially, or at least partially, if not largely, a effect of whatever they do. If monumental UFO sightings continue, and now it seems you can get away without having to have a bag over your head to talk about the subject. It could be the next year or so that it becomes generally acknowledged, and then we have to cope with whatever this implies. We can't cope with ourselves. How can we expect to cope with them? But I wouldn't be surprised if disclosure occurs over the next couple of years.
I hope so. At least while I'm alive.
Maybe even faster than that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it before I pass on. My feeling. What do you think if the government came out now? This is you. I just want your opinion. Came out on Saturday and said, "Hey, we've been visited by UFOs. We don't know if they're friendly or not, but people don't be, we have our military, we got our Air Force, and we got our, don't be worried. We can handle any situation." How would you feel? And what's your feeling?
Well, I think it would come as a shock to everybody if the government actually, they're real, they don't know what they're doing. And there probably would be an initial panic. I mean, we can point to 70 years of UFOs without UFOs wiping us out, but that doesn't mean they're not going to do it in the near future. And we might even get from them a statement as to what they're doing here, but could we believe them?
No. Do you believe there actually has been cattle mutilations along with human mutilations?
Well, I believe there have been cattle mutilations. Linda Howe certainly believes in there being human mutilations. There's a lot of human beings that were negatively affected down in Brazil back in the 70s and 80s, I guess it was, where some people seem to have been killed by UFOs.
I have some pictures that somebody worked in the government before they retired sent me. And I'll tell you, they sent it to me almost a year ago, and I haven't looked at them for about a year because I tell you, when he sent them to me, I looked at them and I actually got sick to my stomach and I couldn't sleep for a couple of days.
Well, I have a such a